Hey, welcome back to this thing that I've not titled yet. We're going to do a deep dive today into Kenneth Burke's essay, The Rhetoric of Hitler's Battle. I'm recording this before our stream when we talk about fascism and sort of how to represent fascism in fiction in a way that doesn't succumb to fascism itself. How do we build fascist characters without making them the monsters that we're trying to represent, if that makes sense. One of the ways I'm hoping to make sense of that struggle, wow, what a poor choice of words there, is by doing this deep dive into Kenneth Burke's essay. This essay first appeared in 1939, I think just a few months before Hitler invaded Poland. And basically, Burke was very concerned with what was happening in Germany. So yeah, Burke basically wrote this essay as sort of a warning to the world. He sees something going on with Hitler, and not so much in Hitler's posturing. There's a lot of strongman posturing happening back in the 1930s, in Europe especially. Mainly, he's concerned with the publication of Mein Kampf. So he's going to dive into sort of the rhetorical moves that Hitler is making in that text and try to piece together exactly what he's doing to make a lot of people in Germany think he's a good guy. The edition I'm reading from was published in 1957, but it's important to note this original essay came out in 1939 when, Hitler is really kicking things into high gear. I'll be taking notes down here below in pretty much the same format as I did with Borges earlier. So you'll see page numbers over here on the left in this Word document, and I'll just kind of be taking notes, writing down interesting quotes, questions I might have about the text. All right, let's dive in. Okay, yeah. This is always too intense. I always forget in this article just how much Burke quotes from Hitler's Mein Kampf, and it's weird. It's really strange to read. But yeah, I think what Burke is doing here, God, I took a lot of notes. I'll try to make sense of some of these. I might skip over a few. But one reason I'm doing this, by the way, too, is I know when we get in the stream, I can't break things down very carefully like I'd like to, so might be good to do so here and to fix typos whenever I see them too. I love this. This is in the first paragraph. There are other ways of burning books than on the pyre. Reviewers of Mein Kampf contributing more to our gratification than to our enlightenment. Basically, Burke in this first paragraph is speaking to the common reaction to Hitler at the time, which was for critics and reviewers and journalists to basically just make fun of him. They saw him as a clown. His speeches were over the top. His logic in Mein Kampf and elsewhere was absurd and really easy to make fun of. And Burke here, I think, is saying, hey, pump the brakes. The guy is ridiculous, but he's wielding a heck of a lot of power. He's moving a lot of people in one direction, and we really need to figure out how he's doing this. He's writing in America, of course, and this quote here, let us try to discover what kind of medicine this medicine man has concocted, that we may know with greater accuracy exactly what to guard against if we are to forestall the concocting of similar medicine in America. Basically, at this point, again, this is before Hitler has invaded Poland, so Burke is just mainly concerned with guarding against Hitlerism or fascism rising in America. Even at this point, he doesn't know what is to come, which I find very fascinating. It's hard to square the next 7 years or so of what occurs in Europe and in the world with the mindset before that time. But that's really important to see this essay as not him trying to contribute to taking Hitler down necessarily. He's just looking at Hitler and saying, hey, we need to keep an eye on this guy because things like this could easily happen here if we don't guard against it. He jokes about Hitler being helpful enough to write down his thoughts so we can read it and plan ahead for how to guard against that kind of stuff. He establishes Munich, or he talks about Munich being established in Germany as the materialization of his unifying panacea. And apparently Hitler in Mein Kampf talked a lot about having a central geographic location, a base or a foundation from which they could strike forth and carry out their plans. And then once you have a central place, you need a common enemy to shoot for. In medieval times, it was the Prince of Evil. Hitler chooses the Jews to be that common enemy to shoot for. Burke talks a lot about how Hitler uses that common enemy, and he talks about it being international. So right here, he's talking about the international enemy of the Jew, so that basically he can ascribe any enemy to that one force, to that one central thing that is pervading everything. So any force from America, any force from anywhere else that is a threat to the German Aryan folk he's going to tie that back to some Jewish plot. So yeah, that's kind of freaky to see that. I like this note here. I think this is a really, really important note. The materialization of a religious pattern is, I think, one terrifically effective weapon of propaganda in a period where religion has been progressively weakened by many centuries of capitalist materialism. Hitler is sort of using the same machinery of religious thought, or he's using the same kind of techniques that religious leaders might use to move people or to galvanize people. Once the enemy is essentialized, all proof is henceforth automatic. So basically, once you find that central enemy, that explains all evil in the world. Talks about middle-class audiences sort of having a love-hate relationship with money and capitalism. Yeah, so the failure of the German economy, he can now ascribe to that central enemy. Interestingly, I don't want to say he gives Hitler credit here, but he does see Hitler's hatred as genuine. It's based on his experience here. There's a quote from Hitler where he talks about debating and complaining about the way in which you can't pin them down. If you beat them in the debate, tomorrow they'll act like they didn't have a debate with you and they move on. So that might kind of explain Hitler's hatred, if he does have a genuine hatred here, and not just a calculated reason why he chose them. Ugh, weird shit. That whenever I see stuff online nowadays, like on YouTube, debate folk, I do wonder what's happening there, and I wonder what the consequences of that are going to be down the line. Because you're sharpening people. Like when you're debating, you are providing your opponent with skills. You're giving them power because they're learning how to fight better. But there's a connection there I think we could talk about maybe more on stream. Oh yeah, this is a really important point here. These two quotes talk about one of the common critiques of Nazism and Hitlerism back at this time period was that it was irrational. People would talk about how ridiculous it was. They make fun of Hitler and things like that. Burke says, obviously it is irrational, but Hitler has clothed his movement in a slogan of reason or under a slogan of reason. To call it irrational is not going to change any minds of those who are caught up in it. Patterns of Hitler's thought are a bastardized or caricatured version of religious thought. And this speaks to, I think, the reason why me as a non-religious person, I still am really curious, and I think it's really important to look at religion and not just try to erase it from the earth, because I think it is deep-seated. This is a way of thought that humans have had for a long time, and to dismiss it as ridiculous or irrational, again, is a little too hasty, I think. God damn, this is exhausting to read, and this is really difficult to balance, and I really hope this is not going to be co-opted or taken out of context or anything like that. Yeah, what a strange thing to do here, but I think we're going to keep at it. Again, just a reminder, what I'm trying to do here is, so DS1 and I, when we're writing these things, we have characters who are obviously fascist, who wield a lot of power and use these techniques over their people, and I think we should get that right. I think we should represent that in an accurate way. But the danger, I think, is being misread, of being, if you have a fascist character and they use charisma and they use sort of their power, and you have a talented actor perhaps playing this role in a movie, for instance, you want to make sure you don't create an actual gun, I guess. So it'd be ridiculous to bring an actual gun loaded onto a film set and have that be used as a prop. Similar idea here. You want to be able to see accurate representation, I guess, but you don't want the damn thing going off and inspiring fascism out there in the real world. That's a slippery slope, I think, to walk here. But hell, we'll try. We'll see where it goes. Moving on. Okay. Wow. Oh, man. Okay, we're at page 181 now. How many we got left? I need to see, because this is a heavy load. Cool. Oh, God. What? Where was I? Okay. Yeah, I think we got to this point here, right? Where the hell was I? Yeah. Okay. Commentary. Oh, Jesus Christ. So Hitler focuses on a problem with parliament. For a parliament at its best is a babble of voices. Hitler basically is looking at the government squabbling and not doing what they need to be doing for the people, I guess. And so he's able to easily say, that's our problem, we need to fix it with me, the one voice. This is a really scary idea here. By the method of associative mergers, using ideas as imagery. I'm going to highlight that one. That seems like a really important idea there. It became tied up in Hitler's rhetoric with Babylon. Yes, the parliament that Hitler's looking at, I think in Vienna at this time period. Basically, Hitler's able to take the idea of that and turn it into like almost a religious icon or image that he can then appeal to and use in his arguments for German unity. Oh my God, that's a terrifying idea. That is such a terrifying idea. And it speaks to this, the power of poetry, maybe, and the power of like filmmaking too. Because film does this. Film takes, ideas and imagery and ties them up in weird fucking ways and powerful ways that shape people's imaginative possibilities. He talks about the media here too, talks about journalists and what they're doing, that media do the same sort of thing. They attack Congress without actually delving too deeply into the root causes of the divides that Congress is arguing about, thereby appeasing their reading public but leaving the problems unaddressed. And Burke basically argues this is a perfect recipe for fascism. Well, that's great. That's happening right now, isn't it? And it seems like, because the Congress stuff, if you read about which politicians are responsible for what, who gets blamed for what, it's like a drama, right? It plays out on a stage, sort of, and we're entertained by that, I guess. And that appeases us, so that's where the media stay, and they don't actually delve too deeply into the root causes. This reminds me a lot of Noam Chomsky's book, Manufacturing Consent, which I need to go back and look more deeply into that, but the idea there being the media, left-wing media, right-wing media, whatever it is operating in a middle zone, I guess, or operating in like one silo together, even though they see themselves as separate. They're operating there together. The battles that they're playing out are not actually helping. They're just distracting, or they're just kind of keeping public opinion in one safe zone, safe for those in power to keep power. Yeah, I'm kind of, I need to go back and look at that in more depth, probably before our stream. I'll do that. Yeah, I put a lot of notes here. I mistakenly read this as 2 things, but he has a list of 4 things that play into, or features that play into Hitler's unification device. And he talks about the inborn dignity of German is sinister, secularized revision of Christian theology. So when Hitler is talking about the blood of an Aryan being pure or being somehow special, those are terms used by religious zealots or people who wield religious power to sort of coalesce a people into one unified force. And so Hitler is basically secularizing that, taking the religion out, but leaving all the basic machinery for controlling people in there. After the defeat of Germany in the World War, there were especially strong emotional needs this compensatory doctrine of inborn superiority could gratify. Yeah, so the idea that basically Germany had taken a big nationalistic hit. They thought they were going to take over Europe, or at least establish a lot more power in Europe than they had before. That got smacked down pretty hard, and so that kind of left a gaping psychological hole that Hitler could jump in and fill. Projection device, which was number 2, allows someone to place the causes of their own infirmities into a vessel outside the self. Then they can fight the scapegoat rather than deal with their own problems. Commercial use, here's a really disturbing quote here. By attacking Jew finance instead of finance, it could stimulate an enthusiastic movement that left Aryan finance in control. Whenever I bring up Hitler and Nazism in my classes, sometimes I do this in like the second English class when we talk about rhetoric, just because I think this is a really important topic. But it's difficult to talk about because, again, you have to address these ideas. You have to like bring in Nazi imagery, bring in propaganda, and whenever you do that, the danger is propaganda is going to do what propaganda does, and it's going to move minds in some directions you don't want it to move. This is a particularly insidious idea of like Hitler being a great leader or being a genius of some sort, because look what he did. He pulled Germany out. He got them out of the hole, and people were prospering and doing great financially and that kind of shit. And yeah, the way he did that was by stealing a lot of people's fucking money, and by basically saying, these folks over here are doing it the right way, these folks over here are doing it the wrong way, so we have every right now to go take their shit and invest it in our own shit. And that's horrific. I mean, and some people look back at that and they see that as a genius political move. Well done. Fuck. Even talking about it in a snide way is difficult. For the German people, who had just suffered a big blow to the collective ego after World War I, the categorical dignity of a superior race was a perfect recipe for the situation. It was spiritual insofar as it was above crude economic interests, but it was materialized at the psychologically right spot in that the enemy was something you could see. This is so insidious here. Again, an example of how Hitler's taking the religious machinery, stripping away the symbolism, and just using the machinery itself as a way to turn people's heads and say, there's your enemy right there. You see them? They're obviously the enemy. Let's attack them. Yeah, terrifying. Wow. The people's natural and justified resentment against internal division itself is turned against the diagnostician who states it as a fact. This diagnostician, it is felt, is the cause of the disunity he named. This one deserves some highlighting, I think. This one feels really, 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 really fucking relevant right now. Critical race theory being a buzzword, and any sort of attempt to reconcile or talk about or broach the subject of America's racist history, you're positioned as an enemy. If you even bring up the possibility that we need to do some unpacking of our history and talk about the things that are unsettling, and nonetheless we stand upon them. You know, this is the ground we're on, y'all. We need to look at it and talk about it and figure it out. But to do so is to be named an enemy of America. Yeah, so this is happening back then too. That's great. That's wonderful to see that pattern emerging once again. By the fucking way, we're going to talk about this on the stream anyway, but just this past fucking week, there's been this leaked audio from a Texas school board meeting, I think, or some kind of Texas meeting in an elementary school, where there's this big push to show opposing viewpoints to controversial ideas. And in this recording, one of the administrators says something about, if you have any books on the Holocaust, make sure you have, opposing viewpoints to that. And like some of the teachers in the room, of course, were like, the Holocaust? What? And like the administrator confirms it. It's like, yeah, we've had that come up, and so be sure to do that. And what the fuck is going on here? I don't know. And as a teacher in college, I haven't seen, or I haven't had much pressure on this yet. I feel the air has changed when I'm in the classroom, though. It's not as, it could just be my perception of things, but something's changed here, and it's disturbing and unsettling, and I think we should talk about it. This idea that Hitler combines ideas like a poet combines images, that's a freaky thought. Hitler's cure for the rabble of disunified voices in Parliament is one voice. So he's identified, there's our problem. And we're going to look at Congress, too, possibly, and say, look, there's our problem. Look, they can't get anything done. They're all just a rabble of just voices. They can't solve anything. So if you say that, the solution for, in Hitler's case, and I guess in any kind of fascist case, is, hey, one voice, we can get things done. I jump in, I do these things, we're good, and I represent the people. And that's a critical factor here, is that Hitler's voice, he uses these poetics, these images of his own concocting, his medicine, to fuse his voice with the voice of the people. And like medieval religious thoughts about the cosmos, Hitler's cure is actually posited as a sort of burden to bear. This is a freaky idea here too. To his logic, the Aryans are superior, so as the superior form of life on the earth, they have the responsibility to rule the world. And it's a responsibility. It's a burden to bear, ultimately. Whew, yeah, that's freaky shit. Burke distinguishes Hitler's division between people and enemy thus. Aryan, for in Hitler's equation, is sacrifice. You sacrifice yourself by joining the military, or by helping the cause, or things like that. And in Hitler's arithmetic again, or poetics maybe, Jewish equals self-preservation. So it's individualistic, not sacrificial for the greater good. Again, in Hitler's Hitler's scheme here. Fuck, this shit is... Oh, God. It's freaky. It's freaky. I do wonder what Burke thought about this after all the shit came out, too, because in 1939, there's rumblings, nobody knows exactly what's going on, but a few years later, we know what happened. We know what the fuck happened, and god damn. Okay, let's push through, man. Let's push through. Got a few more pages left. We'll take some notes, give some commentary, and... Okay, yeah, let's do it. Fuck it. Alright. I finished. Oh, man. This is insane here. I'd forgotten all about this, but this is really interesting. This speaks again to Burke's admonishment of critics of Hitler who were just making fun of him, who were just using him as the butt of jokes and sort of, I guess, appeasing their readers by writing funny things about this wild guy over in Germany. It plays into that, but also Hitler wanted a specific kind of criticism to feed into his structures too, or to feed into his power structures. He was very, very anti-objective criticism. So any kind of critical work that looked at something from a lot of different angles and that acknowledged the critic's own limitations maybe, or sort of had that as a basis, that was not going to work for Hitler's Germany. So what Hitler wanted was the kind of criticism that would be a pure and simple coefficient of power, enabling him to go most effectively in the direction he had chosen. Ones and zeros, I'm guessing. A or B, bad or good. Page 182. Once the Nazi Party had become effectively organized and had its army of guards or bouncers to maltreat hecklers and throw them from the hall. So yeah, basically this was an important idea. Burke talks a lot about how Hitler was really, really big about rallies. He really saw them as central to consolidating power and giving himself the psychological comfort of being in a group of like-minded individuals, but also showing that group the power that they held through him, and that Hitler would intentionally provoke hecklers by putting things in his speech that he knew would piss those people off and get them to yell at him, and then his people, his guards, would descend upon them with flying fists and knock them out and toss them out of the hall, which for everyone present who was on Hitler's side, I guess was a fun thing to see. He identifies a trinity of government: the popularity of the leader, the force to back the popularity. And this is an important idea here. The third element, according to Burke, and I'm reading about this about halfway through this book. This is a really interesting one that I haven't looked at too much in detail yet, but the Rhetoric of Religion, he talks about the Trinity being like Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, and the Holy Ghost being like a product of the Father-Son collision, or sort of the father-son dynamic. And so similar thing here, I think. Popularity, force, and the third thing is popularity and force together, maintained long enough to become backed by a tradition. Oh, that's freaky shit, man. That's really freaky shit. And again, this just speaks to this idea of why did this man get a fuck ton of other people to join him in this doomed crusade? There you go. He used the Trinity. He used the structure of the Trinity, which has gotten a lot of people to do a lot of crazy things. Took away the Father, Son, Holy Ghost stuff and packed in his own stuff in there. Kept the machinery, took away the symbols, and replaced it with his own stuff. I like this quote here. Were Hitler simply a poet, he might have written a work with an anti-Semitic turn and let it go at that. And again, just a reminder, Burke is writing before Hitler really destroys Europe. And so this line carries a lot more weight than I think Burke even intended. Imagining sort of Hitler's energy filtered towards something in the arts as opposed to politics and what that would have left the world with and what that would have actually done. That's a alternate history we can think about, I guess. But he asked this question near the end, what are we to learn from Hitler's book? For one thing, I believe that he has shown to a very disturbing degree the power of endless repetition. And this is such a funny fucking thing. It's endless repetition. Repetition is something that critics of art typically make fun of, right? This is something we talked about in a previous stream a little bit, in the idea of having dynamic artwork or dynamic representations. Critics like to see that. They encourage artists to go for that. And if an artist does sort of endlessly repeat, or a politician even endlessly repeats things over and over again, they get made fun of. But that discounts the power of that for the people that the politician is trying to move. The power of repetition. And here he's not talking about repeating the same phrase over and over. He's mainly talking about repeating the same idea over and over in different guise. Harping on the same point over and over and over again. Hitler being the voice of the people. Over and over and over again in different guise, for those people. That's the power of that, which a critic can see through instantly because they're very familiar with how people use words and poetic ideas like that, and they make fun of it, and okay, whatever, but you discount that. If you just make fun of it and leave it alone, you're not seeing the damage it could potentially do. On page 187, he talks about he was not offering people a rival worldview. Rather, he was offering a worldview to people who had no other to pit against it. And this plays into this idea that I'm concerned about. Again, not being a religious person myself, but seeing the genuine meaning a religious mindset can give to someone. Just a feeling of meaning, and if you don't have anything like that, are you vulnerable? Is there some kind of pragmatic purpose or some kind of practical benefit of having that mindset, especially when another mindset that's using the same machinery comes along and tries to dethrone it? And if you have nothing there, it's just going to pop into your brain, and those things are going to activate. And I don't know. It's a weird thought. Something that I will definitely return to, and something we should think about for our stream for sure, too. Let's see. There is nothing in religion proper that requires a fascist state. There is much in religion, when misused, that does lead to a fascist state. Here's an important thing he puts there at the end of his essay, that basically he's not saying religion is a bad thing. Burke is not saying erase religion from the face of the earth. So he's saying it's not a necessary cause of fascism, but the stuff in religion, when misused and abused by a Hitler-type figure, can lead to a fascist state. And this would speak again to, like, if you have a purely religious mindset, you're not willing to step outside that and think beyond just what that stuff gives you. Maybe you can't see that. Maybe you can't see that there is dangerous stuff in your religion if it is misused. It's not saying stop being a Christian. It's not saying stop being a Muslim or a Buddhist or whatever, or an atheist even. But it is saying recognize the rhetorical swords, the rhetorical weaponry that is stored in that mode of thinking. He ends the essay by talking about our job then as our anti-Hitler battle is to find all available ways of making the Hitlerite distortions of religion apparent, in order that politicians of his kind in America be unable to perform a similar swindle. That's a really loaded word there, swindle. I think that's an accurate word, though. Hitler is a con man. He's he's bullshitting his way to the top, and and he's bullshitting himself, I think, too, to a large degree. He fools himself into believing his own bullshit. And our job if we're trying to prevent that kind of stuff from happening. And again, Burke is talking about 1930s America, 1939. He's saying that we need to guard against this stuff happening here. I think we still need to guard against it here. I think I don't know why I would be thinking that. But basically, yeah, I'm anxious to get into the stream and talk to DS1 about this and see what we come up with. Because again, our goal is, I think, maybe in line with this last quote I have here, and that how can we, as storytellers and artists who are not so much critics, but we want to make shit and put it out there in the world, how can we make sure, A, that we're not contributing to something like this, like a Hitlerite force that could take our ideas, take our images, and use them for their own purposes. But B, also, can we use it in some way to help people see this shit when it's being used against them? Because that's a really important key point here, I think, is that when you're caught up in it, when you're caught up in this patriotic fervor, and everybody else around you is too, what avenues do you have to look at it and be critical about it? What avenues do you have to activate objective criticism of the forces around you? And maybe movies can do that. Maybe there is some potential for that there. I don't know. But I think it's worth delving into. Thank you all for joining me. Look forward next time to some lighter fare as we deep dive into some different things.